So about 10 days ago somebody IM'd me on the channel and was sort of asking me about how much should he be willing to pay for memory cards and cartridges, and for, in his case it happened to be a D50, but how much should he expect him to pay? So we had a sort of a bit of an exchange, and I left it at that, and then I thought about it and I thought, well, probably it's might be a good idea to just do a piece to camera saying how much I've been paying when I've been buying cartridges and memory cards for some of my legacy pieces of equipment. So these cards and cartridges tend to fall into three camps. Okay, so the first camp is the restore cartridge or card. So that will effectively take your keyboard back to the original factory settings. The second camp is the sort of stock sounds supplied by the manufacturer. So these are manufacturer sanctioned expansion sounds for the keyboard, guaranteed to work. And then the third set are sort of specialist sounds and tones that have been produced by other companies, effectively to allow you to expand the tones and sounds on the cards, okay, or on the keyboard, sorry. So they fall into three categories. The first thing is to talk about is, why would you buy a card or a cartridge when you have a computer? So the first thing I would counter to that is there is no reason to buy a card or a cartridge when you have a computer. However, some of these pieces of equipment are quite old. Their MIDI structures are don't support some of the more modern protocols that MIDI is asking for. Now I know MIDI is a universal standard, but some of the sort of more modern keyboards allow you to do more things with MIDI than the older keyboards will allow you to do. Okay. So for example, on some keyboards the MIDI channels will only take 99 as the maximum value, whereas we all know that MIDI is 127 is the maximum value on MIDI standard. So just things like that. But the second reason is, yes, you can use a computer and you can hook it up, and you then have to go through a setup routine on the keyboard, and you can download the sounds from the computer to the keyboard. All well and good, and I'm not disputing that is a valid way of doing this. However, if you have a cartridge or a card with the factory settings on that cartridge or card, restoring the keyboard is a matter of minutes. You know, it's not a matter of, you know, it can be sort of like 10-15 minutes by the time you've configured everything and followed the instructions. Doing it with a card, it's 1 or 2 minutes and it's done. It really is that quick. So talking to that, in terms of why should you, I would always recommend, if you buy a legacy piece of equipment that has a memory card slot in it or a memory cartridge slot in it, is go and hunt down, if you don't get it with the equipment when you buy it, the restore cartridge. Okay, that is probably the one I would say go get, period. And I have pretty much done that for myself, gone and got the restore cartridge for all the pieces of equipment I own, where I've been able to find it. So I'm going to start with the DX7, probably because that's the oldest piece of kit I possess at the moment out in the racks. And the DX7 restore cartridge looks a bit like that. And as you can see on the far end of it, it says this is for a DX7 2D or an FD, FD being the one with the floppy drive in it, which I don't have, I just have a D. Okay, and that, I picked that up for £30. I actually picked it up locally. I didn't have to pay postage and package. I just went and picked it up from the guy one afternoon. All well and good. Pop that in the keyboard, and it will restore in a couple of seconds. Well, yeah, I think it's about 30 seconds to do restore from this. Brilliant little device. I say I paid £30. I wouldn't expect to pay more than £50 for this. There should have been one of these with every single DX7 that was released. They've got separated over time. Obviously mine did because I had to go and buy one, but you know, there should be a number of these floating around in the market to go and pick up. With the DX7, the next sort of is what I classify as stock sounds. So Yamaha did a number of libraries of stock sounds. This is one of those libraries. This is the VCR library set. Okay, and as you can see, this is all sort of very booklet, cartridge, So this is in extremely good condition for something that is getting on for 30 odd years old now. And again, I don't think I paid more than about £60 for any of these. Okay, so these are, I would expect to be somewhere in 50 to £70 is sort of the range I'd expect for one of those. And then the third, which I don't have an example of out on the top here, is the specialist cards. So things that come from sort of some of these specialist house. I'm thinking things at places like Rito in Japan, who produced a lot of sound cartridges for various keyboards over the years, from various different sources as well. You know, they were a publishing house more than anything else. And some of those cards are getting quite rare now. Cartridges are getting quite rare now. I purchased a couple this morning, where I sort of went onto eBay and had a long conversation with the guy, and eventually we negotiated down to a price I was prepared to accept. But those I would say you might be sort of stretching it to sort of £100. So all in all, I wouldn't expect to pay for any of these cartridges individually more than £100, which is sort of about $145 US. But most of them I expect to pay sort of about £50, which sort of comes in around about 75 US. That's the sort of area that I'd be willing to part with my cash when I'm purchasing this sort of stuff. So moving over to a different keyboard, so the D50 is a second one. It sits sort of just below me over my shoulder, and the D50, Roland produced a series of memory cards for the D50, a series of stock memory cards. And they started with this one, which was the PND5000, and this worked in both the D50 keyboard and also in the rack mount D550. Okay, so that was and this is the Restore cartridge. Now they did a series of 5 of these cards. They were sold in sets. The sets have been split up over the years by various individuals. So, you know, if you can get hold of a set. And I was actually really lucky when I bought my D50, because I then went on the internet within about 2 or 3 weeks and I saw somebody selling the complete set of cards. So I managed to get the complete set in one hit, but I've seen 1s and 2s come up. And in fact, I've got one of these for sale because I bought it as a job lot with some other cards and I don't really need it, so I'm going to put that on eBay and see if I can sell it. But that's the Restore card for a D50 or D550. Okay, that's the 00 card. But then in addition to that, you know, a number of other companies did cards for the D50. There you go, there's one by Voice Crystal, who were sort of fairly prolific at the time on a number of different platforms. That's the Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Stock sounds for the D50. There's another one they did, which was the John Kane card. There you go, there's the John Kane card. Again, for stock sounds for the D50. So there's Voice Crystal. They then did a number of other cards that came out. I'm just looking for one. I think it might be. I can't see that at the moment. So things like that, which these were demo cards that were issued by Roland or through another company called Soft and Soft. They weren't for sale, but of course I bought them on eBay for 50 quid, or less than that probably. There's another one by Ritter, and the Ritter ones are becoming harder and harder to get now. Okay, so there's the Ritter one. And again, I don't think I paid more than about 50 quid for either of these. And they just expand the tones. So there you go, on Roland they followed the same path. They had a Restore cartridge, they had stock sounds, and then they had specialist companies doing cards for the platform. The third keyboard is the M1, which you can see sitting beside me here. And again, I've got a number of cards that give you partial full restores from Korg themselves, which I've bought over the years, but I ended up buying a card from another vendor, and I've seen the guy advertising on eBay on a fairly frequent basis, so you know he must have a stock of them somewhere, where that is the restore card that will take you back to the factory sounds, factory combinations, and clear down the sequencer for you. So that's really, really good. Korg themselves did a number of cards, and their cards split into two. They did a series of cards which sort of I would call the MPC range, and they were sort of MPC dash zeros or two numeric, so 0, 1 through to about 15, I think they were. And these were two. These came in two cards, okay? And it's really important that if you see these on the internet, you buy both cards together. So here you go, here's number 2. That's the Synth 1 collection for the M1, okay? This card is a waveform card, you can tell it because it's got the 2 rows of contacts, and this is a combinations and sounds card, okay? That needs that to work properly. Okay, and they would have come at the time with an index card that shows you all the programs and combinations that were on there, and it would also have a demo song showing you what the thing sounded like if you could do it properly. So, as I said, don't buy these individually. Make sure you always buy these as a pair of cards. Okay, otherwise you won't be able to get the best out of the card. And in fact, the way I would look at it is that a card on its own is pretty much worthless without the pair, corresponding one. Okay, so that was one set, and as I say, they did about 15 of these over different things. So they did synth, they did the piano one is very sought after. I do have. Can't find it's not to hand. I do have the piano one, and that's the one that things like the opening stabs on "Love Lives" by Alison Limerick. That was that piano card. Then there were a number of Korg did a number of other cards, which was the an MPC, but it was a 3 number at the end of it, 0 something something, and there were a number of those they did. I'm not quite sure. It's very difficult with the Korg stuff to actually work out how many they actually did of those. I've got probably about 4 or 5 of them, but they seem to be very, very rare and don't come up very often. So I can't really tell you how many they did. I know they did 15 of the dual card ones. Then there were a number of other companies that did cards for the M1. So there was Valhalla. Did a series of cards. They did the M series, which is a series of 4, and the B series, which I think is also a series of 4, but I only have 3 of these. And then there was another couple of other companies, as Sound Source. They did a whole raft of synthesis type cards, which were really good. And again, for each one of those, I mean, I think the restore card for the M1 was around about the £30 mark. I don't think I paid more than about 55 or £60 for any of the cards on the M1. So that's the sort of price range I'd expect you to be paying for an M1 card. Then we come on to, as you're aware, I own a D70, but the D70 is currently in storage, so I'm not using that. Now the D70, again, you have to be rather careful when you're buying the cards, because some of the cards require the waveform cards, or they call them elements cards, to be present. So for argument's sake, here is an elements card that has to be in the keyboard for that one to work. Okay? If it doesn't have the elements card in there, it doesn't work properly. So you need to be very careful, and they would have come originally in the same box. So you would have bought the sound expansion, you would have got the elements card and the sound card in the same box. So you need to be careful when you're buying stuff for the D70. And again, Roland did a bunch of stock sounds, which came like that. Okay. What I haven't been able to find out with the D70 is whether they did a restore card or not. I've never found one so far, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found it. And then there were number of manufacturers who did cards for the Roland as well, the D70, like Voice Crystal there. Okay, so again, you know, with those cards, be careful when you're buying a card for the D70, because quite often they need to be a combination of cards. And again, I would say that one card is pretty worthless without the other card being present, because it needs the other card to load the elements in, to service the waveforms, to service the tones. And then the last group I have is for the D series, the D10 and the D20. These cards will work on a 5 and a D70, but they don't work on the D50, because the D50 had a completely different format for the voicing. So they won't work on a D70, but they will work on the other D formats. And they produced a series of 15 catalogue cards for the D series. So there you go, there's one there which is acoustic guitar, and there's another one which is number 9, which is keyboards and guitar. Okay, and these aren't bad, these are quite good reinforcement sounds if you want something sort of sitting in the back of the mix. Very good for that sort of stuff. And then again with the D series, there was a number of companies, and here's two from Ritter, where they did keyboard, stock sounds for the keyboard. And again, you know, these are about £50, those are about £30 when you're buying them. For the D series, I've not seen a factory restore card, I have to be honest. I don't know whether, again, it's like the D70, I don't know whether a factory restore card actually ever existed. I've just never seen one, so I can't comment on that. If it did, I would go and buy it, because it's, again, for the same reasons as I've said on the other keyboard, restoring from card is so much easier than restoring from a computer. But that's sort of on cards themselves. The other thing is with cards and cartridges is that, you know, with the cartridges, the end is sort of fairly well protected from getting sort of foreign objects in it. Just don't let any of the kids who will sort of try and sort of jam pens and cars and stuff in there, because it's the sort of thing they do. But they're fairly well protected. Even so, I would still have them in a box. I actually keep mine in a drawer in one of the flight cases, so that at least they're away from harm's edge. With the cards themselves, you'll notice that all my cards are in plastic containers. So they would originally probably come in a plastic container, although the Korg ones came in like a plastic wallet, but I've moved them into a plastic container because these are far more protective of the card. They keep them straight, so they don't allow them to bend, and all that sort of jazz. And most of them, as I say, would have come originally in a plastic container like this. You can buy the plastic containers on eBay. I've bought, I think I bought about 50 of these some time back now. These are standard PCIIMA style cards, which are the old style of connectors that used to go into laptops for modems and network cards. Okay, so that's the sort of style of case it is. But as I say, they would have originally come in a case exactly like this back in the day, and those cases have been lost. I have to be honest and say, musicians are the worst at putting things away. They take things out, they put them on the top, they leave them, you know, and that's how this stuff gets damaged. So put them away, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm guilty of it as well, because I do exactly the same when I'm working. I take something out, I put it on the side, but I do try at the end of a session to actually put them all back in boxes if they're not in the keyboard themselves. So there you go, there's my take on cards. I think you should buy a card for the keyboard, definitely the restore card if you can get away with it, because that will make your life so much easier. You know, the newer, more modern stuff like this has ROMs in them, so you can get back to the factory settings within seconds by a series of keystrokes. But this stuff here, resetting this stuff, the legacy stuff that was in the middle, where for whatever reason, probably cost, the manufacturers didn't put a ROM restore routine in the keyboard itself. So you have to go off and either dump it from a computer using SysX, or you use one of these. Anyway, that's the lowdown on cards.